Good afternoon, Eric. My name's Nick Detweiler. I am the section head for the Commission Submarine Fluids, and you're here to interview today for the 8G Fleet Fluids Group Head and the Prototype Training Platform Group Head position. So some of your responsibilities for the job would be to provide any technical support or guidance in the propulsion plant manuals to help with maintenance, operation, and training of students and then sailors out in the fleet.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. And feel free to call me Nick.
Awesome.
I have your resume here, and I'm not going to try to use it as a crutch going through or a validation that was honest. I know you've had other interviews and we'll have other interviews today about this. But I'm just curious, what's your desire to help support the Navy's function?
Sure. I'm very interested in helping to, especially the training piece of this position, where I'll be able to help the new, I guess, trainees with their early career development and to kind of help move the subfluid systems team forward. So I would like to have the opportunity to, really work towards a honorable cause, and help out in all of my capacities.
Okay. Are you married or do you have kids? And the reason I ask is there may be some travel associated with the job from time to time.
Sure. I am not and do not.
Okay. So traveling seems like a good thing or a good possibility.
Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. So you mentioned that you like the training piece. Part of your role will be to mentor junior engineers, as we call them. So they're college grads, they're commissioned officers in the Navy. They won't go to sea in a operational sense.
Okay.
They'll serve their commitment working here in the various shops that we have. And then after the 5 years, based on evaluation and retention numbers, most are offered the opportunity to stay on and continue their career in the civilian workforce and still work here. So you will have some senior engineers or lead engineers, as we call them, that have more than 5 years experience, and they range from 5 to 15 years, just depending on the shop. So that's the skill set that you'll be managing on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome.
And one more thing about your role here, it is very broad. There are 4 different plant variants that you will hold cognizance over. Each has its own unique features. We're not looking for you to be the technical expert and be able to differentiate between the 4. Your people will be able to do that.
Right.
Just understand that you may get the same technical issues to resolve from time to time from the different platforms that have various changes in what the response would be. So wanted to make sure you're aware of that, that it is a very challenging and demanding job in that role.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So during the interview, we'll talk about some of your background, both professionally and educationally. We'll talk about some strengths and weaknesses, and we'll just go from there. So my goal is to let you do a lot of the talking and me ask follow-on questions.
Perfect. So
why don't you tell me one thing that you currently like about your current position?
Sure. So my current position is as an engineering designer on a major real estate development project in New York City. So in that position, I'm doing a lot of interacting between myself, my technical project team, and then the real estate, basically the owner of the project. And we communicate with them constantly, working between the transit agencies, all of the state and city agencies, and the real estate company. so that we can focus on delivering a product that will meet all of the demands of the client and kind of create a beautifully architecturally intertwined piece that will work in New York City, while staying within the bounds of all of the agencies and the local laws. So I really enjoy the piece where we get to interact with the client, take in their information, and creatively apply that information to design.
Okay. About how many agencies do you work with on a typical project?
Sure. So the one that I'm on right now, we are dealing a lot with the New York City Transit Authority because of the location of the project. There's a number of it's at Grand Central, so it's a transportation hub. So we have to incorporate moving people through the project zone during all times of the day. There's a subway that runs below Park Avenue at this location. There are connections to Metro North, Long Island Railroad, etc. So a lot of work with New York City Transit, Department of Buildings, various stakeholders along those lines. So on a daily basis, mostly just those two, but there are 5 or 6 different agencies that are also overseeing, that are involved in a smaller capacity.
Okay. And how does your communication with those agencies? Is it a face-to-face phone call, weekly scheduled meeting?
All of the above, yeah. So we have weekly meetings. We set up meetings as needed as well, depending on the project demands. But also, I have contacts at these agencies that I can reach out to in the event of a quick decision, so that we can, expeditiously hear what their decisions would be, and kind of focus on getting that decision, transferring it into writing, and then applying those decisions to the project design.
Okay. Do you have a major achievement in the current project you're working on that you'd like to talk about?
Sure. So a couple weeks ago, actually, we were dealing with a little bit of an issue where the contractor who's out there performing the design and building actually cut a beam that was being supporting the street,
Okay.
42nd Street in New York City, a little bit short. So this new design that we were putting together wasn't going to work anymore. They cut too much of the steel away.
Okay.
And the temporary support was in, but it was not going to be able to stay in that location. So we had to quickly come up with a solution so that we can move forward and not allow this relatively small mistake, but in the grand scheme of things. But at the time, it was somewhat of a crisis for our design team. And we went out in the field, surveyed the new information, kind of checked out the surroundings, and confirmed that everything we had on paper was actually what it looks like. And it kind of gave us a nice opportunity to get out there and look around. But it also challenged us, and we had to sit down and quickly, take a few hours, get the whole team together, bring in the architects, bring in the mechanical, structural, and under the project manager, kind of come up with a best path forward. And my team sat down and suggested a couple of designs that would change the way that the street was framed, basically, and transferring those loads in a different way from street to steel to rock. But we were able to quickly put together a solution that extended kind of a diagonal bracing system that was able to keep certain headrooms open that were needed by the architects and the agencies, basically, and use that information to put together a design that was accepted by the client, was code compliant, and was acceptable to our design teams, architecturally, structurally, mechanically, everything.
Okay. How did you mentioned that you had several different initial proposals. How did you narrow down from the initial brainstorming session to the final approved design?
Right. So what we do is we basically sit down and we put down on the table everything that we know is in place, and we take that information and allow ourselves to kind of just sketch. We put down a number of designs, and we bring in the architects first, and they're the ones who are focused on the code compliance. Uh, Allowing people to get out of the areas in the case of emergency is a huge concern, obviously. So they know all of these codes that are designed to keep people safe, basically. And
Okay.
we would put something down that we believed we could build and would be safe to structurally support everything, and then run it by them to try to get a compliance check. And then from there, we would talk to the mechanical designers and make sure that they can still run all of their necessary conduits and piping and everything through those areas, and kind of bounce things off. It was a very dynamic kind of meeting, basically, where we were able to take our time and bounce ideas back and forth and come up with a design that was acceptable to everybody.
Okay. Were there any major challenges during that process?
Sure. So there's one designer on the team, mechanical designer, who is somewhat difficult in changing his way of thinking about these things. So he's very focused on, I did this once. He's not very interested in changing his work over and over again. And in a team environment, it's very important for everybody to be focused on providing an outcome that works for everybody on the team and that everybody can get behind. So he was very slow to respond and get behind any ideas, and it was definitely a challenge to convince him as an individual of new designs. But we were able to move forward with that and kind of convince him, and understanding that this was a design change that we didn't foresee beforehand, and we had to really focus on kind of bringing everybody together, making sure that he understood this wasn't something that could be avoided. He was going to have to do new work, and get him behind thinking creatively about how to solve a problem instead of being stuck in this box, per se, of having troubles with changing his ways, basically.
Okay. Anything else that you like about your current role?
Sure. Actually, the team that I'm on right now, all the designers, I really enjoy working with them in a creative capacity. So I've mentioned a few times that this position is somewhat creative in that you work between different groups and get to apply what you hear in words from each different person, each different design team, and create a product that can be basically whatever you want it to be within certain bounds. So I really enjoy the back and forth that I get with my peers on this team, and our ability to move from words to drawings to final product, and apply all of the different interesting and varied systems of teams to come up with an outcome.
Okay. What do you feel that you do well in your current role?
Sure. I think that I'm very good with communication. I'm on top of and organized with all of my uh, interactions with the various people that I deal with, especially on this project because it is such a large scale. We get to work with a lot of people, which is exciting, but at the same time, it's very important for us to stay on top of communications with each of those different groups that I've mentioned. So I've kind of developed a system for myself with electronic tracking of the work that I do, and I record everything that I need to get going in like a short term, long term, um, and like further down the road, kind of laying out the timing of when I need to interact with each of these people,
Okay.
so that I can break everything down, perform my design, and do the technical side of my job, but also keep everyone that needs to understand what's going on kind of in the loop. And I think I balance that very well, the way that I get to separate my technical from my communication side, but also stay on top of everything.
Okay. What else do you excel at?
Sure. I think I'm very strong technically, which I know doesn't apply specifically to the work that I'll be doing in this position, but I think the understanding that I have is general, and I'm able to break things down from a big picture to apply different technical understandings and create my design. But I'm also kind of on top of the technical specifics of that work. So I'm very good with seeing a problem and being able to understand the steps that are going to need to be taken, and then perform the calculations and drawing that allows that to move forward. And I'm very quick with this technical aspect.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So on that recent design issue that we faced with the incorrect cutting of street level steel, I was able to quickly come up with a new connection design for that diagonal bracing piece that we designed,
Okay.
and put together a pretty quick new connection that was involved 3 different stages of connection between the diagonal column and this steel. So that allowed us to connect to both sides of this beam, but also to the underside, and provided extra shear resistance, basically, that allowed us to safely move forward with the design.
Okay. Is there anything you don't like about your current job?
So my current project manager has been giving us some issues lately. We've been struggling to work with him in the way that he has so many different big picture things going on, and has kind of been losing sight of the smaller deadlines that are stacking up in order to create the bigger product. So we've been having some troubles with him in just meeting these different smaller deadlines. The other week I threw something down in his desk for him to look at on a Monday, and had to go out on a Wednesday. And by Friday, he still hadn't looked at it, and came up to me as he was leaving on Friday and said, "Just send it out. Our technical guys looked at it, but his job is to see the big picture, understand the coordination between each different project team, and make sure that each piece fits." And we're doing our structural submission first. So it allowed him a little flexibility to say that, in that everyone else would then have to meet my design, basically.
Okay.
But it was frustrating to see him walking out on a Friday afternoon, having not even taken the time to review what I had done, and just kind of pushing it away.
Right. Was it something that you just put on his desk, or did you have a conversation with him to let him know the time sensitivity of it?
Yeah, so he knew the time sensitivity. had actually reminded him about it several times throughout the week as well to try to push him on a little bit and get that review done, but was unable to actually get him to take the time to look at it, which was a little bit unfortunate. But yeah, we've moved forward. So.
Okay. I know we talked about a couple challenges, and you mentioned a couple strengths already. Do you have any weaknesses that you'd like to talk about?
Sure. So sometimes I am a little bit less forgiving, I guess, in working with people that might not understand the technical aspects of my job, and I've kind of noticed this in myself recently, which is a positive, I guess. But um, I've in the past been easily frustrated by people that were not quick to understand the work that I was presenting them, and maybe didn't do as good of a job as I could have explaining that technical side and bringing them up to speed with the work that I had done.
Okay. Are you doing anything to try to balance out now that you've identified?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of check myself in the way that I notice myself doing it, and kind of focus on getting past that and really making sure that everybody's up to speed at each step of this process, and asking questions, saying, all right, do you understand this? What can I do to make you better understand it? Because these people that I work with don't always have the same technical background. Some are strictly in project management. Some, working with architects, that they don't understand the engineering side of it. They understand the aesthetic side of it and the code compliance side of it. So I've made sure that I'm better communicating at a level that everybody can understand, and really breaking it down so that everybody can get on the same page.
Okay. And last job related, is there a particular reason why you're searching to transfer careers right now?
Sure. So as an early stage engineer, I think that I'm interested in experiencing a number of different aspects of technical careers. And I've learned a significant amount from this current position, but I also feel that by moving into something that's a more bigger picture and more has more oversight, I'll be able to experience a number of different aspects of engineering careers, and will be able to better myself in that capacity, where I can apply my background in a new way and learn from that and grow as a professional.
Okay. And you're a civil engineer by training, so that'll work for the current position based on technical background going through. Did you do any extracurriculars while in college?
Yeah, so I've always been pretty involved in athletics. I was actually the intramural supervisor and scheduler. So I worked for the athletic department in setting up all of the schedules for intramural games. When people couldn't make their games, they would come to me, and I would kind of run this Excel sheet that I had that would basically break things down, see what fields are open when, what teams can play when, and made sure that that was all running smoothly. I was in a fraternity on campus, and involved myself in a number of engineering kind of projects that were going on. I was on the steel bridge team my junior year, which was a project that we put together to meet the demands of a nationwide competition, where students built a 20-foot span bridge in 3-foot length components, each piece of the bridge had to fit into a 3-foot by 4-inch by 6-inch box, basically.
Okay.
And we had to put it together as fast as possible and make it hold as much weight in competition. So we traveled to Penn State and put this thing together and competed against other teams, which was an interesting experience. I learned how to weld and mill and things like that, which was cool to see and really helpful in the position that I'm in currently, because I can kind of better understand how things will come together in the field by the professionals that are actually out there working as contractors, which is definitely helpful and kind of gives me a holistic understanding of the way the project runs.
No, that's very interesting. Very interesting. Talked about your strengths, talked about some a weakness. What are your career goals?
Sure. So as this position suggests, I'm interested in moving in a more managerial direction. I'm very interested in moving towards a bigger picture understanding of engineering projects and helping to work with people to move them towards success in those positions. So I think it applies very well to this position. And I'm interested in figuring out how I can best apply my engineering skills to a management kind of a professional career.
Okay. Have you had any mentorship training before, or just on the job, a mentor that you have that you could talk a little bit about that relationship? Because that would be a large role for this position.
Sure. So we do mentor training at the office that I work at now. It's not a company-wide initiative really, but it's something that we've taken on as an office basically. And we've opened ourselves up to discussions with project managers, with principals, and higher level people, so that we can basically they come in and you can speak in a professional or non-professional capacity about career development, about any kind of issues that you have on the job. So it kind of provides a good way to get a back and forth going between the designers and the people that are sourcing projects, basically. And for a specific mentor, I actually turn to my mom quite often. Whenever I'm faced with an issue, I'll call her up, get her on the phone, and she's had a lot of experience working from the other side, from the management side. So
Okay.
It helps me see things in a 360-degree view, kind of, and understand the way that people that I'm interacting with, looking up to as managers, are looking back at me and understanding how they're taking what I have to say and turning it around and responding. So I think it's been an effective and interesting way to kind of better understand all sides of relationships in the workplace.
No, that sounds like a great tool in your toolkit there to help. So we've talked a lot about you. What have you heard anything about this organization before, or do you have any questions you'd like to ask me about the position?
Sure. I definitely, I know a fair amount about the organization, but I guess, can you talk to me a little bit more about the day-to-day? You gave kind of a big picture, but what will I be doing on Wednesday at 3 p.m., for example?
Okay. So there is, as you mentioned, you have your lists of long-term, short-term, and very near-term timelines to do things. We have P1, P2, and P3 letters that we write. So a example of a P3 would be a routine rev to the manual that would happen twice a year. So that's something that has to be done on time, but not something that would require your direct attention to make sure that somebody's working on it 24/7, 3.5 months before it's due. A P2 would be an improvement that might save some time or a number of valve manipulations moving through, and we'd like to have it. It is an advantage to the operators out in the fleet, so it has a higher priority than just the routine revs. And that would be more time sensitive. Generally, you're looking at about a 2-month turnaround from the time that would come in. And then your P1 is a immediate, we need to get this issue resolved in order to get an asset out on station and to support their operations. So that is almost a round the clock 1 to 2 day turnaround. So that's the letter side of the house. The other thing that you do owning the fleet platforms is if there's any technical problem while an asset is underway, they'll report that via message traffic. And unfortunately, a lot of the job is read and react. There are some days where you will get no messages, and there are some days where every boat that's out will send you a message. And one of the things that we do, and it was great to hear some of your communication skills, is we are the integrator. So we own the fluid system, but there's another shop that would own the pump, and there's another shop that owns the valves in the system. But when you talk to them, they'll say, well, the pump spins or the valve opens and shuts. That does what it's supposed to do. What's that impact on the fluid system? And then that becomes our responsibility to get their concerns and incorporate that into concise guidance that we can give back out to the fleet. Sure. So unfortunately, I can't tell you what you'll be doing at 9:30 or 3 o'clock every Wednesday, because that's subject to change at almost drop of a hat. Now, you do have 8 to 10 people that work for you. So it isn't you that's running around with all these messages, and it's not just because one message comes in, then that derails the entire group's progress. But that would be your job to manage the allocation of resources and how to most effectively support the fleet assets.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you.
There is some weekend work. Just depends on whether or not messages come in. Now you just get a call that there's a message that would require your attention from one of your cognizant engineers, and based on your development of them, they'll know when you need to be notified, or they have the authority to concur with a ship's intentions. And then, as I said, one of the big things we do is integrate roles within the building. So there are a few times where there's been or will be some technical disagreements amongst sections. And if your guys are having problems getting that resolved, then they might elevate that up to your level.
Sure. In
order to help facilitate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any other questions?
I think that about covers it.
Okay. Looking at your resume and having the discussions with you, I think that you're qualified for the job. I think that you would be successful here. There are some more interview steps, and the way that the process works, you'll have at least 2 other interviews with other section heads about this. They may or may not have one of your peers that covers a different platform type, just so that they're able to give you the direct, this is really what it's like to be the group head feedback, so that you understand what you're getting into. But you'll hear within the next 48 hours as to what the next step would be.
Great. Thank you.
And thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, you as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you again, Eric.
Thanks.